Good day, class. This is Ms. De La Torre, and at this point, let's continue our discussion about the different components of the ecosystem. Last time, we're done talking about the abiotic components, and at this point, let's proceed with the biotic components. But before we start, let's talk about the concept of conservation of matter. Okay, as per this, matter is neither created nor destroyed, but rather is being recycled over and over again. And it can be transformed or recombined, but it doesn't disappear. Another thing to take note of when it comes to this one is that key components of an ecosystem includes nitrogen and phosphorus and other um, nutrients that is being recycled so that the living and the non-living components of an ecosystem thrive. So here, if we're going to recall the different biogeochemical cycles such as the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, the sulfur cycle, together with water cycle, and even the carbon-oxygen cycle plays a major role when it comes to the recycling of the different nutrients that is essential for the lives, okay, of different abiotic and biotic components of an ecosystem. As it undergo different processes depending on the cycle, each nutrient tends to get transformed, recombined, but at the end of the day, it's not fully destroyed. It only is being absorbed and transferred from one part or component of the ecosystem to another. And that also includes as well what the different biomolecules that is essential for the living organisms. And that includes what? The proteins, the nucleic acid, part of which includes the DNA and RNA, depending on the organism, lipids, and at the same time, carbohydrates. Now, let's talk about the energy in the ecosystem. If matter or nutrient is being transformed, okay, but at the same time conserved, how about energy flow in an ecosystem? Whenever we talk about energy, the first thing that comes into mind is the concept of heat. Heat describes the energy that can be transferred between objects of different temperatures. When a substance absorbs heat, it's either or it shows the following. First, its Ke or kinetic energy increases. Okay, that means the molecules of the matter or a substance gets excited. And the higher the kinetic energy present within the molecules of a matter or a substance, tendency is it's going to change its state. And if you're going to check, energy is technically the ability to do work, okay? And when this is or when energy is present, tendency is matter is being moved, okay, over a certain distance. And when matter moves at a certain distance, heat is being transferred between two or more objects at different temperature. Okay? Always take note as well that energy can take many different forms, not just simply heat, but it can also come in light, electricity, chemical, or even mechanical energy. And if we talk about mechanical energy, well, most probably your first idea of it includes the kinetic energy and the potential energy. Kinetic energy is possessed by those objects that are in motion, whereas if they are at rest, they still store certain amount of energy, and that is called potential energy. Atoms and molecules cycle endlessly, like matter, obviously, through organisms and their environment, but energy flows in a one-way path. So always remember that whenever we talk about nutrient flow, specifically the biogeochemical cycles that includes atoms and molecules of different matter, well, it flows in a cyclic manner, okay? And it goes endlessly, okay, within the different components of an ecosystem, and that includes both organisms and their environment. But whenever we talk about energy flow, it is a one-way path. Okay, later on we'll get to trace it and even further understand what do we mean by energy flowing in one-way path. Okay, but another concept that will help us further understand it is the concept of thermodynamics. Why? Because thermodynamics describes the conservation and degradation of energy. But what is thermodynamics at the first place? This studies how energy is transferred in a natural process. Okay, this also involves what? The rates of flow and the transformation of energy from one form or quality to another. And whenever we talk about thermodynamics, the most common concepts associated with it are the laws of it. So that includes the first law and the second law. First law focuses on the concept that energy is neither created nor destroyed under normal condition. It is only converted into one form or another. Okay? Second law, on the other hand, focuses on the concept that with each successive energy transfer or transformation in a system, let's say for example, energy traveling within a food chain or a food web, less energy is available to do work. That is because disorder or entropy tends to increase in all natural systems. So, what do we mean by that? Let's take, for example, the concept of organisms capturing energy. Primary producers are those that are capable of producing their own food and are able to what? Harness the energy coming from the sun. And when we talk about the energy coming from the sun, well, that is solar energy. And it's very essential to life for two main reasons. Why? First off, sun provides warmth. And without that, obviously, Earth temperature regulation will not be possible, and that will cause the early demise of all living creatures on the planet. Second is, solar radiation gives life-sustaining energy. And again, that's in the form of solar energy, which is captured by primary producers. Commonly, those are what we call as the photosynthetic organisms. And the very popular ones are the plants. Okay? Primary producers are capable of creating carbohydrates and other compounds using just sunlight, air, and water. Commonly, for example, plants, the carbohydrate that they're able to produce is in the form of starch or sugar. And that is shown in this particular chemical equation, which summarizes the process of photosynthesis. Here, we can see that photosynthesis converts radiant energy, which is solar energy, together with carbohydrate and water into useful high-quality chemical energy in the bonds that hold together organic molecule. And that organic molecule here is what we call as sugar or starch. The bonds formed to produce this sugar or starch harness or holds certain chemical energy that once the sugar is digested, okay, and converted into ATP or energy, that is what? That is going to release this energy or chemical energy stored within this particular bonds. And another byproduct of this photosynthesis is what? Oxygen. There's another way that is being utilized by other types of organisms to produce or to capture energy. And that is what we call as chemosynthesis. Chemosynthesis is the process where we extract energy from inorganic chemical compounds, typically hydrogen sulfide. And obviously, this process is only done by chemosynthetic organism. Commonly, this refers to the microbes that lives on a very extreme places. That includes volcanic underwater vents, okay, where certain microbes are capable of producing and consuming hydrogen sulfide to generate their own food and release energy. Okay? So every energy transformation and every energy flows starts from obviously the sun, radiating solar energy that is being captured by primary producers in the form of photosynthetic plants and other organisms, because there are also photosynthetic um, marine animals and organisms that also act as the base or foundation of um, food chains and food webs within those particular marine ecosystem. Now, let's talk about how energy is exchanged in an ecosystem. Now, for us to further understand how this works, obviously, we should also be familiar with cellular respiration. If photosynthetic organisms like plants are capable of harnessing the solar energy that comes from the sun, how about those organisms that are not photosynthetic, like different animals, and at the same time us human beings? How do we harness and extract energy? Okay, and how do we aid in the exchange of energy in the ecosystem? Well, cellular respiration explains that one. Cellular respiration involves splitting carbon and hydrogen atoms from the sugar molecules and recombining them with oxygen to recreate carbon dioxide and water. And this process is that of releasing a chemical energy. If the previous slide showed the photosynthesis chemical equation, this one here also simplifies or summarizes the process of what? Cellular respiration. Us human beings and other animals makes use of this process so that we can extract energy from the food that we're consuming, since we cannot create our own food and we rely on the primary producers. So that makes us what? Consumers. But consumers has their own different levels too, depending on the order of consuming certain plants or animals. So C6H12O6 here is just simply the starch or the carbohydrate that is generated or present among plants. And obviously, this is like the byproduct of photosynthesis if you're going to recall. Now, let's say, for example, showing or using this particular illustration that we got here. We have a rabbit, we have plants, we have mushrooms, and we have, I think this is an earthworm. How is cellular respiration present in this scenario? So obviously, what happens first, like what I mentioned a while ago, us human beings and other animals being consumers will consume plants or the producer. In the process of doing so, what happened is that the sugar or carbohydrate, in this case starch, produced by photosynthesis, will be transferred or consumed by the rabbit. The rabbit here being the first organism to consume the plant makes it what? The primary consumer or the first order consumer. Usually, since the typical producer are photosynthetic plants, that makes the first order consumer or the primary consumer herbivores, like this particular rabbit that we have here. Now, what happens next is that obviously the rabbit will digest the food that it has consumed. That digestion will involve the conversion of the sugar consumed by the rabbit from the plants into the cellular energy currency, okay, which is in the form of ATP or adenosine triphosphate, as we call it. ATP is the form of energy that our cells and other organism cells are capable of using for energy. If carbohydrates and other sources of energy is not converted into ATP, then our cells cannot use it. Now, let's say, for example, that this particular rabbit um, suddenly died. Let's say, for example, due to um, natural phenomena, okay, or cause. What will happen eventually is that the body of the dead rabbit will decay. That decay will be assisted by what we call as decomposers, and that can include mushrooms. Those that consume or assist in the decomposition of other organic matter can be called as saprophytes, while worms can also assist in the decomposition of other organic matter, so they are also called the decomposer. In that particular way or manner, okay, nutrients that has been obtained from the producer is being directed or returned back into the soil, which will then be used by other living plants to live and again perform photosynthesis. Ma'am, where is cellular respiration there? Again, cellular respiration is assisted by the process of digestion of different consumers. Okay? And again, that's our way of getting energy from the producers who directly get solar energy from the sun. Okay? Now, since we're talking about biotic factors, let's try to dig deeper and talk about the ecological organization. Obviously, the base and foundation of an ecological organization involves an individual organism, or in this called, sorry, in this at this point is being called as species. So regardless if you're talking about two or more organism, well, technically we still refer to them as species with S. There's no such thing as a species. Okay? So species are organisms of the same kind. So let's say in this case, though I don't think my screen is showing it right now, I hope later on it will get loaded. But in this case, we have like a single individual fish. Let's say this is milkfish. Let's assume. Okay. So all or several milkfish, okay, refers to a species of milkfish. Okay, they have the same kind of genes, and since they do have the same DNA, okay, they're capable of interbreeding with one another in their normal habitat, and they produce live fertile offspring. Always remember that organisms of different species cannot produce their own offspring. Okay? So this is just like a random thing to say, but I just wanted to advise everyone. You cannot expect a cat to mate with a dog and produce an offspring because on a species level, that's not feasible because reproduction can only occur among organisms of same species. Okay? Always remember that. Now, the next level of ecological organization refers to population, and this refers to all members of a species living in a given area at the same time. So let's say we have multiple or several milkfishes occupying a certain part of the ocean. Okay, and they thrive in that particular area for quite some time. And their main goal obviously is to live and to reproduce in that particular area. Then that makes them a population of milkfishes. Okay? Now, if these population of milkfishes start to interact, okay, in a again in the same area, let's say for example, or move to another area where they also encounter other species or other populations of a species, then that makes or that builds what? A community. Okay? So, for example, us living things like for I'm sorry, us human beings staying in our area. Let's say, for example, um, if I may use our scenario right now at the university, okay? We're all staying at the university for a certain period of time because that is where you learn and that is where we teach. And at the same time, the university is made out of other organisms. There's like vegetations within it. There's different physical infrastructures. There's also a lot of other animals and birds, right? Especially in our lagoon, if you're going to notice it. So that and we all interact with one another. So that's an example of a community. Now, a community that interacts with another type of community makes up what we call an ecosystem. Okay? When several communities interact with each other and at the same time, not just with the biological or living things, but at the same time with the physical environment, then that's the time you come up with an ecosystem. And when different ecosystem join or combine with each other, occupying a certain large geographical area, let's say for example in the polar area or in the temperate zone area or in the tropical region, then that gives you a biome. And usually a biome is characterized with a climax community. When we say climax community, there's like a typical dominant flora or plant life, vegetation, in dominant fauna, which refers to the animal life. Like, for example, desert is an example of a biome. And the very first thing that will come into our minds if we are to ask what are the animals in a desert, well, typically that will be camels. Whereas if we talk about the plants present there, most probably you'll give me succulents or cactus, cacti. Typically, this climax community are adapted or adaptive to the climate, okay? Um, the climate of that particular geographical area. Okay, if it's obviously in the polar region, then um, these type of biomes have flora and fauna that are adapted to very low temperature. Whereas if we talk about the biomes occupying the tropical region of the planet, then they are adapted to the very hot and dry temperature of that particular climate zone. Lastly, the largest among the ecological organization and is made up of these different levels refers to the biosphere. And biosphere technically refers to all the living part or living things that makes up the entire planet. Okay, it's made up of the parts of the earth where life exists and that covers all ecosystem. Now, let's talk about the concept of ecosystem productivity. Whenever we talk about ecosystem productivity, it also involves the concept of biomass or the amount of biomass or biomaterial that is being produced in a given area during a given period of time. The idea is if we are able to create large amount of biomass in a given time, then we are productive. If it's the other way around, then it's not productive. Okay? So commonly, productivity can also be associated with the process of photosynthesis because of that's the time where we are able to create or to produce vegetations, right? And obviously, plants and animals are biomass; they are biological material, and primary producers being the basis or the foundation of a food chain or a food web kind of dictates directly or affects directly the amount of living organisms that may thrive in a certain area. If there's a lot or if there's a high amount of producers in a certain area, then we can say that most probably there's a lot of consumers that can thrive in that particular area as well. Now, let's talk about trophic level because this refers to the feeding level of an organism in an ecosystem. We've been talking about this one for quite some time already since the beginning of this lecture. And um, the thing about trophic level, whenever I talk about the primary producers, the consumers, and the decomposers, those are actually the trophic levels themselves. Okay? Primary producers are also known as the autotrophs because they can feed themselves, like they can produce their own food and they can generate their own energy, right? Consumers, on the other hand, like what I mentioned a while ago, are those that harness chemical energy that from producers. Okay, they obtain energy that is produced by the producers. Okay, and consumers come in different levels. First one is the primary, followed by the secondary, tertiary, and quaternary, and even higher levels depending on the level of feeding. Okay, so primary consumer obviously are the ones that consume the primary producer. Primary consumer is devoured by secondary consumer, and the secondary consumer is consumed by the tertiary consumer, and so on and so forth. Now, the highest or the ones that occupies the highest trophic level are known to be the top predator or the apex predator. Okay, what makes them the apex predator? That is because they are known to have less or no predator at all. That's the reason why they are at the top. And typically, they are the ones that die due to natural uh, cost. Okay. Another thing to take note of whenever we talk about trophic level is that harsh environment has simpler food chain than a temperate or tropical one. So with harsh, we mean like the polar regions or the very dry, hot environments of the certain part of the tropics. Even those areas where there's very high salt concentration or very high temperature like volcanic vents and all, we can expect that these areas show simpler food chain because biodiversity or the diversity of living organisms here are also very limited. Let's talk about limiting factors and tolerance. Okay? Whenever we talk about limiting factors, this actually refers to what? This actually refers to the environmental influences that constrain, when we say constrain, stop, okay, or hinders, prohibits, okay, or affects negatively what? The productivity of organism, population, and communities. That means um, thriving is compromised by limiting factors. This prevents them from achieving their full biological potential, which could be realized under optimal condition. Optimal condition meaning if all the necessary things they needed to survive or to thrive has been given to them. Okay. And then a limiting factor has been introduced, then they cannot achieve it, even if or despite of having such. Limiting factors changes or limiting factors are also associated with changes in the environmental factors that affects the well-being and survival of organisms in an ecosystem. So if there's a sudden change in the amount of different abiotic factors that can act as a limiting factor, like for example, temperature. For us human beings, since we are homeotherms or warm-blooded organisms, We cannot thrive on a very, very cold environment. Okay? So temperature being an abiotic factor has to be not too cold and not too hot. When it starts to be very, very, very cold or very, very hot, well, obviously, our metabolism will be affected. If it's too cold, our metabolism will slow down. If it's too hot, our metabolism will be very, very fast. And that's not the normal thing. And we cannot function properly if that's the case. So here in that particular scenario, temperature is the limiting factor. Another example is when food source is scarce. Okay? If nutrients is not available in the normal amount, let's say it's too small, then obviously our health will be compromised. Our energy will be compromised. Okay? Our work will be compromised. And we are not going to perform or function properly. So in that case, nutrient is also another limiting factor. But class, always remember, limiting factors are not always abiotic by nature. They can also be biotic factors as well. Okay? Now, let's talk about the concepts of law of minimum and law of tolerance. So, law of minimum says that the growth and well-being of an organism is ultimately limited by that essential resource, which is in its lowest supply relative to what is required. So, for example, going back, okay, law of minimum example is the scenario I gave a while ago about nutrients. If food is very, very scarce, okay, it's very, very limited. We won't be able to consume food properly and it's a domino effect. So that follows the law of minimum. Any resources that is essential for us to live properly but is in minimum amount, then that follows the law of minimum. Law of tolerance refers to what? For each physical factor in the environment, a minimum and a maximum limit exists beyond which the organism does not thrive or survive. So that only talks about what? Our tolerance limit. We have our own thresholds. Okay? And I don't think it's only applicable in the concept of how we live in an ecosystem, but in life in general, right? When it comes to our patients, we do have our own thresholds and we do have our own limits, right? And if we go past our limit, then it tips us in a different way. It could cause or it could create a negative feeling. And again, that's also a domino effect. Same goes with living in an ecosystem. Okay, there we can only do so much, like that's the idea. Okay, we can only live in a certain span of time without food, without water, without air. So that span of time that allows us to live, okay, until such time that we can no longer take it anymore. If these different resources are no longer available, then that's like our tolerance limit, and it follows that law of tolerance. Okay, now let's talk about the principle of limiting factors, though this one I think it is connected obviously with the previous slide. Okay, principle of limiting factor is like an ecological generalization. At any given time in a particular ecosystem, productivity is constrained by a single metabolically essential factor that is present in the least supply relative to the potential biological demand. It goes back to the concept of limiting factor. Again, if a certain abiotic factor or a biotic factor which is very essential, okay, comes in a very limited supply, then it's going to cause an imbalance, okay, in that particular ecosystem. Why? Because limiting factors represent a type of ecological stress let's say if there's limited number of producers, so what's the effect of that on the consumer? Obviously, there will be high competition because the amount of producers is limited, right? So there will be competition. There will be survival of the fittest. Those who can only go and fight uh, against each other, okay, for the limited supply of food are the only ones to thrive. So that causes or exerts ecological stress. Okay, if alleviated, this will result in greater productivity and development of the ecosystem. Like going back to that particular example, if the scarcity in a producer is alleviated, that problem has been solved, a lot of producers thrive, then a lot of consumers can have their own take of their food. And there's less competition, and everyone eventually will have their own fair share of what they need to survive. And when we achieve that equilibrium of some sort, that state of balance, that is what we call as homeostasis. Okay? Like what is shown in this slide, homeostasis refers to the optimum balance in any system, be it biological or environmental in nature. If I were to relate this to other fields of science, homeostasis is like equilibrium in physics. Okay? And I think that's like the most ano ba, closest term. Okay? Now let's talk about ecological niche. So whenever we talk about ecological niche, hindi po ito, it's not pronounced as niche, okay? It's niche. Okay? Niche actually refers to the role of an organism relating to or as it fits in the ecosystem in which it belongs. Okay? Morphological, physiological, and behavioral ways of adaptation of organism to their ecological community is very important. How an organism makes a living in an ecological community it belongs to is also how we refer to ecological niche. Simply put, for example, going back to the tropic levels, aside from showing the feeding level of the organism within an ecosystem, the tropic level also shows the ecological niche of different organisms. Ma'am, in what way? For example, producers. Okay? Their role is to act as the baseline and the foundation of the energy pyramid or commonly the food chain and the food web. And without them, consumers won't survive. Okay? So that's the ecological niche of plants and other photosynthetic organisms to act as the direct link between solar energy from the sun, okay, so that it can reach what? The different components and levels of the ecosystem, okay, as it being passed on by the producers to the different levels of consumers. Decomposers, okay, they are called that way because their function or their ecological niche is to decompose what? Organic matter so that the remaining nutrients present within this organic matter can be returned back to the soil and so that the soil can act as substrate that will not just simply act as an anchorage but at the same time what? Um, a base where producers can obtain nutrients that again were drawn from these decaying organic matter. Okay? So that's what we call ecological niche. If we are to relate it at home, okay? Ma'am, is ecological niche applicable at home? Yes. Okay? If you're the youngest daughter or sister or brother, okay, obviously your ecological niche inside the house is what? Runner. Ikaw yung utusan ni ate, kuya, bili ng ganito, bili ng ganyan. Usually, if you're also the youngest, typically sa'yo din napupunta yung mga gamit nila ate, nila kuya, and all, yung mga hand-me-down, yan. That's an example. Okay? If you're like the eldest daughter or sister, brother, most likely, ikaw yung taga-alin? Taga-utos sa mga bunso ninyong kapatid. So, that's an ecological niche inside the home or within your household. Okay, let's talk about, nothing to worry, we're almost done. I think I'm like 4 slides away or 3 slides away from the end of this lesson. And I hope you reach this point or you're still with me up until this time. Okay? So here, I'm just simply showing you an example of an energy pyramid. What is an energy pyramid? Well, obviously it's the same with food chain and food web. This it's just that it's in a pyramidal format. Okay? So here, organisms can be identified both by the trophic level at which they feed and by the kinds of food that they eat. And again, I think it's quite redundant already, but again, always remember, if we are to talk about the pyramid, obviously the very base of the pyramid is the largest one. And as you move along, it gets smaller and smaller until such time you reach the peak or the tip, right? What makes up the base of the pyramid are the producers, since they are the ones that directly harness what? The energy coming from the sun. Okay? And obviously, among the organisms that makes up the energy pyramid, producers are the one that uh, possesses the highest amount of energy because they directly get it from the sun. Now, the idea is as you move along, obviously, the pyramid goes steeper and smaller. That also shows what? The amount of energy present per level. Okay? Since primary consumers, typically herbivores or plant eaters, are the ones that acts as primary consumers, consume our producers, tendency is they will be getting energy from the plants that they've consumed, but not 100%. Because if we are to follow the concept of thermodynamics, again, as heat energy, or I'm sorry, as energy is being transferred from one organism to another or one level to another, certain amount of it is being lost in the process of conversion. And that's typically in the form of heat. So heat energy here or heat produced here is actually the amount of energy lost or dissipating to the environment. Okay? It's not technically 100% loss. It only gets distributed or dissipating through the environment. So, as the primary consumer is being consumed by the secondary ones, still energy transfer and transformation happens, and at the same time, heat loss is still being generated. Okay? Until such time that you reach the tertiary consumer, or in this case, like what you're seeing right now here on a slide, okay? Hawk here is like our tertiary consumer, so this is like the tip of the pyramid or the apex predator. Okay? Now, all of these consumers comes in different forms. They could be herbivores, such as in the case of primary consumers. Um, then we can say that with the secondary consumers, they could be carnivores or those that eat flesh, or omnivores that eat both plant and animals. Now, ma'am, what will happen to this tertiary consumer? Okay, let's say if the hawk or the apex predator here died due to natural cause, that's the time when scavengers or decomposers in the form of detritivores can, or saprophytes can what? Consume them and return the nutrients present in their organic carcasses. Okay. into or back to the earth or the soil. Ma'am, what distinguishes scavengers from detritivores? Scavengers clean up dead carcasses of larger animals. Typically, hyenas are examples and vultures are examples of these. Detritivores, they consume litter, debris, and dung. So, common examples of detritivores are mushrooms. Okay? And they can also act as saprophytes too. Now, the energy pyramid has this particular general rule of thumb. Okay? And what does it tells us? That 10% of energy in one tropic level, okay, is present. Okay? It's like 10% of energy is the amount of energy you're getting from one level to another. And as you move, okay, across the pyramid up until the tip, you are getting less and less and less amount of energy. Okay? That explains why in this case, if we're going to look at it, we have like the producers here showing certain amount of energy. I think we can use like this figure as energy in joules. Okay? Then as you move along, the amount of energy decreases. Okay? So in this example, numbers show the percentage of energy that is incorporated into the biomass at the next level. Biomass meaning like the living organisms here. Here, decomposers are grouped with producers. Okay? So like that's it. The last two slides, I'm so sorry that for some reason the picture is not loading properly though, but here, okay, though I believe you're quite familiar already with the structure of um, a food chain and a food web. This one here actually is just a food web. Food web is the same with food chain. The only difference is food web can start at any level and at the same time is made out of several or combinations of food chain. Okay? A food chain obviously is made out of the producer followed by the different levels of consumers and then you also got like decomposers there. Okay? You can try to look for other examples of producer, I'm sorry, food chain and food web via the internet. Since this one here is not loading properly, I really do apologize for this one, but I believe at this point, everyone is quite familiar already with how a food chain and a food web looks like. Okay? And yes, that's it. I hope you learned something new today. That ends my lecture about the different biotic components of the ecosystem, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everyone. Bye. Thank you.